I don't know if you've ever contemplated suicide, but I have. I was planning it. I was planning the whole thing. I had reached that point in my life where I felt like the failures that I had not just seen once, but seen over and over again in my life were really more than I was willing to tolerate. I had tried and tried and tried to kick the habit. I had tried and tried and tried to break the addiction. I had tried to clean up my life. I wanted something different, and it wasn't happening. I had given it every ounce of effort I knew how. And I failed again. And I was done. I was ready to give up completely. This was spring, late winter, early spring of 1993. That I really began to become aware. So about August, I was sitting on a swing in Tyler, Texas, and making my plan. How will I do this and leave the car for my mom? How will I do this and not let anybody know that it was on purpose? Because then if they knew it was a suicide, then my mom wouldn't get the life insurance. So I had to work through all the strategies of that. But the thing that really, really got me was that I kept going back to this race in my mind. In fact, when I walked out of the apartment where a guy was allowing me to stay with him, I call him my roommate, but he was paying all the bills and I was just sleeping on his couch. I was working in convenience stores and trying to get my life together after getting out of the Air Force, and I wasn't making any progress. But when I walked out the door of his apartment, after realizing how low I was, how far I had fallen from what I expected my life to be, I left a note on his table. And in that note, I asked a really simple question. How many times can a runner fall down in the same race before the race is just over and there's no point getting up again? And the picture in my mind, you might remember. I don't remember the runner's name, but you can Google the 1992 Olympics and you will see this video. I was standing in the UK watching the event happen live on international television. I was standing in the home of friends of mine while I was on active duty, a British family. All of us gathered around the television as we watched in the final leg of the race this runner who was so far ahead of the rest of the field. I mean, he was easily half a lap ahead on the final lap of the 1 mile race. And as he came around the corner on turn 3, he started to hobble a little bit. And by the time he got out of the turn in turn 4, he was on the ground on his knees, clutching his hamstring. And he looked back and everyone else was now coming into turn 3. And he stood and he ran a few more steps, but then he fell again. And he ran a few more steps and then he fell again. And by this time they're coming through the curve and coming up on turn 4. And he realizes, I only have 50 meters to go to win this race. If I can just move at the same pace that I was before for 50 meters, if I can just hold on that long, I can win this thing. But he couldn't get up off the ground. And he fell again, and he collapsed. But he stayed in his same lane. And he drug himself several meters. Everyone passed him. The guns went off, the ribbons went off, the confetti went off, the race was won, the race was over, and he was still in his lane. And I'm thinking to myself, how is that like my life? I'm trying to run in this race and I just keep falling down. I keep failing. And the race is over. Clearly, it's over. It's been won by somebody else. There's no point in me even getting up again. And as I sat there with that image in my mind, with that picture of failure over and over in my mind, I began to wonder, just like I'd written on a piece of paper, how many times can you fall down in the same race before it's not worth getting up again? And we're in the final chapter of Live a More Excellent Life. And I'm going to tell you that the answer I found that day started an entirely new journey of my life. It was less than 3 weeks after this moment of contemplating suicide that I met the woman who is now my wife for more than 22 years. If I'd given up that day, I wouldn't have my 4 children. I wouldn't have my 5 grandchildren. I wouldn't have the life that I have now. But what stopped me? If you've ever contemplated suicide, the idea of getting free from that melee of darkness and fear and failure is overwhelming. When you find yourself in that dark pit, it's like there's more force pulling you down to failure than there is pulling you up to hope. And I felt that. But I had an old book in my hand, sitting on the swing, watching the children play in the park there in Tyler, Texas. In this old book, I was just thumbing back and forth through it. It had been recommended by a guy that I knew named Doug Anderson. He had been doing some dramatic interpretation of this book, and so there were CDs that we could listen to where he would read the book, but he would act out the voices on it. It was really, really cool. He did the creepy voices too well. But I was reading the actual book from the original author, and I literally, sitting on that swing, contemplating suicide, watching all these lives going on around me, they were unaware of my misery. They were unaware of my self-pity. They were unaware of the darkness that held on to me. But I was fully aware that their life was better than mine. I randomly turned to a page in this little book. And in this book, I hear a story of a man who has fallen again. And his enemies, we all have enemies. His enemies stood around him gloating at his failure and said he didn't have a chance. He's done. He is not getting up. And I thought, they're talking about me. What a failure. Why even bother trying again? And I pictured that man on that track as everyone ran past and the race was over. And I saw my life like a race that was over. And asking the question, why bother getting up? And as these two stories collided in my mind, something sparked my inner memory. My energy began to change. This memory of this track, this memory of this man falling down, this memory of all of these people rushing past him, and the crowds beginning to empty and the stands beginning to empty. And I recalled a moment that changed everything for me. If you Google this, you're going to see it, just like I did the day it happened. The race was over, sure. The fans were starting to leave, absolutely. The timers were gone. In fact, I believe the only thing left on the scoreboard was the timer for the lane that he was in, because he hadn't crossed the line yet. The scorekeepers were going. Only the security guards and a couple of cameramen remained on the track. And then, out of nowhere, a camera catches movement. The cameraman begins to zoom in. There's a scuffle, it looks like, on the track, right outside the stands. And the camera zooms in to find an old man fighting his way through the crowd onto the track. And they start to push him back, like, no, you can't go on the track. And he fights his way onto the track. He walks down to the young man who's collapsed on his knees in the lane. He still has not left the track. He's not even left his lane. And the old man kneels down beside him, scoops him up on his shoulder. And as he limps and hops on one foot, he makes it all the way across the finish line. And then a commentator says, I think that's his dad. And it was like the brightness of the noonday sun shined into my mind. It shined into my life. Suddenly, I felt like there is somebody who cares about me. Now, I haven't had that kind of relationship with my dad. But I want to have that kind of relationship with my dad. I want to be that kind of guy. I want to be the guy that sees somebody failing, sees someone falling, and comes alongside them and doesn't judge them and doesn't say, you're a failure, the race is over, dude, just give it up. But instead comes along and says, as long as you're willing to fight, I will walk with you. As long as you're willing to drag your leg, I will walk with you. As long as you will stay the course and go the right direction, I will walk with you. I want to be that kind of friend. I want to be that kind of dad. I want to be that kind of person. And even if I continue to stumble, and even if I continue to fall, I want to be that kind of person for somebody else. And I want to be the kind of dad that doesn't look at my children when they fail and shake my head in shame and remorse that they've fallen. See, in this book that I was reading, this old book, the debate was going on between this young man and his enemies. And the young man who had fallen didn't know the argument was taking place. But the enemies who were mocking him, the one who was celebrating his failure, and an advisor. The advisor said to the young man, to the one celebrating his failure, I know you think you got him this time. He said, oh, I know he's done. I know he is completely done. He has given up. Look how many times he's fallen. There's no chance he's going to go on from here. And his advisor says, but you missed something. You've forgotten who his father is. His father would never look at him and go, look at you, you failed. Instead, his father looks at him and says, I'm proud of you. You could never have fallen if you hadn't tried to walk in the first place. And suddenly in that moment, the answer came to me. The question that I had left for my roommate. How many times can the runner fall down before the race is simply over? And there was an answer. There was an answer. Because the father who picked up that failure, the father who is symbolized so well by the man walking past security, fighting the judges, fighting the stories, fighting the scoreboard, walking into the lane, was the heart of the same one who said, how many times do we let it go? How many times do we just forget about someone else's failure? And the answer he gave was 7 times 70 times a day. Now, I don't know about you, but I try to have the kind of heart that lets it go. You know, the little song from Frozen, let it go, let it go. But when people hurt me, when people say rude things to me, when people say mean things to me, when people do things that wound me, I want revenge. He says, no, let it go. 490 times a day, let it go. Forget about it. Move on. Let me tell you something. When you have the capacity to A, help those people who have fallen get back to their feet and move forward. B, let it go. 490 offenses a day from the same person. When you can let it go, then you begin to realize the power of letting it go and understand why life, the grand overall designer, the universe, God, whatever you want to call him, he knows your name. And 490 times a day is only the beginning of how many times he will look at you and say, I'm not ashamed of you for falling. I have not forgotten you because you failed. I did not stop loving you when you had a dream and you had a goal and you missed it. I did not forget about you when everything you had planned fell apart. 490 times a day, I will be there to pick you up. I will be there to say, it's okay. I got this. That's a daditude. And if you don't have the kind of attitude that that kind of father has, whether you're male or female, if you don't have that kind of attitude that looks at the failures and mistakes of others and says, I can let it go, then you're going to look in the mirror when you fail, and you're going to fail. You're going to look in the mirror when you fall, and you're going to fall. Governments are going to let you down. Jobs are going to let you down. Friends are going to let you down. Family is going to let you down. You might even look in the mirror and see that you've let yourself down. And if you don't have the kind of daditude that says, I'm going to let it go, then you're going to find yourself in a very miserable life. If you truly want to live a more excellent life, you've got to begin to develop the attitude that I call a daditude. You've got to learn to let it go. Let go of your own mistakes. Let go of your own faults. I truly believe that suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. But the real solution to that problem is a Daditude. Let it go. Look at yourself in the mirror and remind yourself, I am the best me ever made, and there will never be another one. No one can live like me. No one can laugh like me. No one can love like me. I will be proud to be me. If you can maintain that Daditude, you will find a more excellent life waiting for you. And you will inspire people around you to live a more excellent life as well. I hope you've enjoyed this video series. I hope you've enjoyed the book. If you don't have the book, you can email me and I'll send it to you. Or you can go to Amazon.com, look for the bright red and yellow cover. I really want you to have the chance to live a more excellent life. I hope that these principles have been valuable for you. And I hope that you'll share these videos with other people. Do your own book study. Spend time in conversation. There's no better way to learn these principles than to practice them and repeat them and teach them to others. And I encourage you and challenge you to do that. I hope that you have found the tools necessary to live a more excellent life. And I hope that I see you soon. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.